The minute I walked into the TV studio, I felt safe. The hostess of the show was always late. So one day they put me on. You're at a major network affiliate. You've been doing super work and you go, oh man, this is great. You're the expert. You're the marketing person. Your life is good. I would always get hired by somebody I like and then something would change. Everything gets topsy-turvy and you're stuck. And I meet people who are so creative and they're hiding their talents under a bushel.
That's the voice of Kate Bacon, my guest on this edition of the Promo Cowboys podcast. Most of the people I know in TV promos know Kate Bacon. The ones who don't should know her. Part doyenne, part diva, Kate is a serial optimist who knows where the opportunities are and where the bodies are buried. PR specialist, maker-breaker of voiceover careers, this super enthused talent agent slash producer slash blogger slash whatever gets shit done for other people. In short, she cares. Great to have you with us. Thank you for joining me, Kate.
Well, thank you for asking me. I have been a fan of your work for a long time.
Okay, so yourself as an agent.
Oh, never say agent.
Right. Well, forgive me. Yeah, I'm sitting here saying you're not the typical talent agent. So what sets you apart?
A, I'm really cute.
I know some very cute agents.
Oh.
Well, former agents.
Yes.
As somebody who represents talent, you do seem to have a different sort of a business model from other agencies.
Well, I'm the only one who's really produced anything that I can tell. And I went into this because I had talent coming to me saying, oh, you know so much about this and that, and you know everybody.
What do you currently call yourself?
I call myself Well Done Talent, and it's an umbrella name. And Dunn is my maiden name, D-U-N-N-E. And I thought it was kind of clever to, be able to pull that in. And I started out handling voice talent because it was sort of an underserved market, especially for the TV station side. And then it has grown to include consulting in television news, topical promotions, as well as doing, putting the seeds together to do some programming. Because if there's anything the world needs right now, it's programming.
Okay, there are some that would argue that we have a lot of programming and that this is now a golden age. Are you talking about more targeted programming for, say, business to consumer, or more branded programming, which I'm really interested in myself?
I love branded programming, but I love all programming. And even though right now is considered a golden age in television, and I so agree, my God, the list of stuff that just blows me away is pretty amazing. There's also times when I can sit and go click, 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 click down the line of thousands of programs and not have one thing that is of interest to me.
Well, okay, good point. And I mean, content, I think content and programming kind of are synonymous here. And content is part of what we're doing here with Promo Cowboys, just creating some interesting content that might appeal to people in the industry. But yeah. I agree. I will channel surf nowadays and rarely find something that I want to watch. But on the other side of that coin, there are so many shows out there that have been made for just for me. And I have yet to get to them because I can't seem to make the time. It's a real dilemma. I'm almost hoping that they put the pause button on creating new programming so I can catch up.
The gate has changed. The gatekeepers used to be, first it was the movie studios. You had to, get in the gates of the movie studios, literally. Then it was radio, and you had to get into radio. Then then television became the gatekeeper. And with the advent of the internet, there is no gatekeeper other than how fast can you upload and download programming. You are now your own programming department. If you're into news, you are now your own assignment desk.
It's fun. I mean, I got to admit, I love doing this podcast because it's mine. I like writing my novels because they are mine. Nobody can tell me not to, insert a certain character into a scene and with respect to the podcast, if people are interested in talking about their trip, their stories, I'm interested in helping them share those. And it's super fun. And that's what's great about this this new modern age. And were we in an era where we were back to 13 channels, and for the most part,
Oh,
you always find a comedy on, or some sort of drama that may or may not appeal to you, I could probably handle that. But we're here now. I mean, the corral was left open, and all of the horses have escaped. Um, and it's just a matter of making the time to do it, and making the time to read as well, and still making time for your family, and making sure you pay attention to your career and you show up at work on time. I mean, if we all gave up sleep, I think we could probably keep up.
yeah.
Such a slam against my talent made me hotter than a mink, and I swore that I would ride it for amusement or for kink. It was nothing but
There's been so much evolution toward, obviously digital, but also toward younger thinking, younger voices, younger attitudes, and younger talent, frankly. And I mean, a lot of the people that were interns and young associates when I was coming up at NBC are now really running the game.
I'm from the Midwest, and we have found that this Midwest thinking really makes more sense than, no offense, but you guys on both coasts. And that is the concept that you need to be young to do spots is bollocks.
Bollocks, lad. So it sounds to me that you're saying to me, to my face as it were, that I should go Midwest, middle-aged man.
No, I'm saying that you need to find people who think that way.
Bollocks. Just find clients who think the way you think. Such is the advice of an eternal optimist like Kate Bacon. And as chief thinker at her boutique voice agency, Well Done Talent, Kate has navigated the evolution towards youth in all areas of TV marketing, especially narration, from voice of authority to millennial, or network slacker, as my previous guest Alex Kroll puts it. She's got a theory about all this, and it holds some water.
Was after 9/11, and we all were glued to our television sets for what, a whole week, where we didn't even turn them off. We slept with them on in case we didn't want to miss the next thing. We were in shock. We were in shock.
Yeah.
And after that, the big, heavy, deep voices were scary. Think about this. When was the last time you heard a network news interruption with that? We interrupt this program. I
Yeah.
mean, my God, well, plots right there on the sofa. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
So they moved away from that, and that caught on. So we found these marvelous voices that didn't have that sound. I have a guy he's on the Hockey Network, great guy named Mitch Phillips.
Okay.
I know, it was a little plug. And Mitch has this big low voice. And except for sports, I can't get Mitch anything.
So Mitch is doing stuff for the NHL network?
Yeah, and he's marvelous. But that big heavy voice, Mitch was really busy with non-sports stuff. And then after 9/11, it wasn't like they flipped the switch. It wasn't instant, but they got away from that really quickly. Well, now that we have time in between, I notice that some of the deeper voices are coming back.
On a $10 horse and a $40 saddle, I'm going to punch them Texas cattle. Come-a-ki-ya, yippee-yi-yay, come-a-ki-ya, yippee.
A lot of the campaigns that I've worked on in the last 3 to 5 years, fewer and fewer of them were using voice talent. And it's a lot of, text on the screen, and it's heavy sound design. And do you find that is the case with your end of the industry?
Well, what's interesting, I was talking to a trailer guy who will remain nameless, great guy, and at one point his company had 85 people, and now they have 8, right?
Okay.
And he's doing super work. This isn't one of those where you go, he was okay. No, this guy does amazing stuff. And I said, okay, what's the deal with you not using voices anymore? Because this was right after Don LaFontaine passed away.
Right.
And he had, contrary to popular belief, and I got this from the horse's mouth, Don was struggling at the end of his career to get the assignments and the dollars.
Because Ashton Smith had arrived by that point.
Oh, was that it?
Maybe. Well, there's also, there's a handful of others, but I think Ashton is the guy probably. He and Aaron May get the most work these days. There's fewer voices getting regular work, and there's more voices at the same time.
Well, I asked the trailer guy. I said, "What's the deal? You know, you're using clips, you're using nat sound, you're using stuff from the shows themselves, the movies, the films themselves." And he said, "Well, he said the main reason was, he said we used to get a call from a studio, and we want you to, you know, do the trailer for this film, and your budget is X." And he said, then we would get calls from the same studio saying, yes, we want you to do the same thing, but your budget is now X minus.
Yeah.
And one of the first things they cut was the voice, because that was a very lucrative deal for the voice people, the trailer world.
Right. And there's lots of revision taking place in these worlds. And the advent of the marketers and the bean counters being in charge of approving creative leads to, you have to really flesh out the creative entirely for them to listen to and look at, because they don't have the imagination required to know that that scratch track is going to be read by the best voiceover artist there is. And instead, you got to get the VO artist to read the track and then put it in front of that executive. And of course, they're like, let's change that and to a but. And then you're paying another session fee.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why, if you notice, all of the breakthrough television that we were talking about, this golden age, when you hear the producers talk about what they were involved with either their network or their studio or their production entity, and now it's, you know, big, 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 big business, most of the ones that are very successful were left alone.
Back to my conversation with Kate Bacon in a moment. But first, let's see if we can't all agree there's nothing like the buttery smooth and spicy finish of a fine middle shelf bourbon like 1792 small batch Kentucky Straight. Speaking of bourbon, this edition of the Promo Cowboys podcast is brought to you by bourbon, beer, and bar pretzels, and by the TV industry crime novel Promo Cowboy. You know, Kirkus Reviews called Promo Cowboy a genre-bending mystery set in the high-stakes world of TV production. This original, well-written crime story will win plenty of fans. Now back to my conversation with Kate Bacon, and the question I like to ask all my guests. Where did it all begin?
Well, I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and my mother was in radio. And she was the first violinist for the St. Louis Symphony. And she had parties. And all the people and all the friends who would come to the house, they were all in the ad agency world or the radio world or the burgeoning world of television, which was taking off and taking over the town. One of her best friends was literally Peggy from Mad Men, Eleanor Orne. She worked in a world of all men. She was so amazing. She brought this guy to dinner one night. He was crazy. I was really little, but I do remember laughing because, you know, when you laugh at the dinner table, you know, like milk in your nose and stuff. And later I realized, you know, in discussing it, she brought Carlin. She brought George Carlin to dinner. She used to write for Carlin.
So wait, stop a second. Are you saying that you sat at the same table with George Carlin when you were a kid?
When I was a kid, yeah, he came to dinner with Ellie Orne.
I love the idea that you were at the table with George Carlin, who is somebody who's obviously very important to many of us.
And then I went to Stevens College, and I was going to be an actress. And the first day of school, they said, well, you know, acting classes meet on Saturday morning. And I literally went, well, I'm not going to do that because I have a social life. And so I switched to television because I felt the minute I walked into the TV studio, I felt at home. I felt safe.
Oh, I've been down the lane to see Miss Betsy Jane. She's a young thing and wants to leave her mammy.
I transferred to SMU in Dallas because all my friends did, and was in the TV department at SMU. And I got a phone call toward the end of my junior year from my advisor, and he said, I want you to go and interview for a job. So I borrowed somebody's car and drove down to WFAA in Dallas and interviewed with legendary news director Marty Haig, and I got hired. And that was my first job, and I ended up to be an associate producer, which means I made coffee with a hose because it was an old-fashioned coffee machine that was the size of like a bathtub, and you made coffee with the hose, and you made copies and passed them out and stuff. And this was a big newsroom, and it was a big deal, and the number one station in Dallas. It was great.
Katie Couric's got nothing on Kate Bacon, other than that bloated salary from Yahoo. But right place plus right time plus right attitude and a big smile equals success. Doesn't hurt to wear something form-fitting.
The lady who was the hostess of the show was always late. So one day they put me on because I was looking particularly good. You had to wear skirts to work, and I owned 5 skirts, and I think it was my good skirt that day. And they put me on, and they thought it was good, so that was fun. And
Okay, this is like a really Marlo Thomas thing here, okay? This is like that girl. You were like literally like the star broke her leg. We need you to go on. Here's your lines.
Oh, God, no. And I wasn't really on it. I was just part of it.
Ride on, mighty rider, you got your reins in your hand. Well, ride on, mighty rider, you got your reins.
I met the assignment editor. His name was Bert Shipp, and he gave me the best piece of advice. He said, never spit in your wastebasket.
Meaning, if you throw some copy away, crumple it up, throw it in the garbage, and then spit on it, you might have to fish that out again.
Exactly. Because what seems like a bad idea at 7 in the morning will save your butt at 3. And you know what? That is actually true, except for the spitting part. I don't spit.
Like Betty had a baby, bam-ba-lam, like Betty had a baby, bam-ba-lam, while the thing went crazy.
So you sound like you were sort of driving your early career movements. You were in charge of your career decisions.
Oh, I wanted to stay in Dallas. That was always my goal, was to stay in Dallas. And it just didn't happen. I worked in St. Louis. I worked in San Antonio. I worked in Houston. I worked in LA, Jacksonville, Florida. I worked in Orlando, Florida. I went where I liked the boss. And there were a couple of times I went where I needed the money, and that never worked out. Although I did need the money, it didn't work out.
How did those decisions come to you? Were you, when it was time to leave, like, I'm going to get out of here before they ask me to leave?
I would always get hired by somebody I liked, and then something would change. Ownership changes, affiliation changes. I was looking for the best of both worlds. I actually believe that you can have it all. I had a friend in the business. He knew a lot of people. His name was John Tischendorf. He was the best guy ever. And he went by Tish, which was no relation to the people who owned CBS. And Tish was the guy who'd always say, hey, call this guy up and get to know him. So I was calling people up like that's how I got to know Chuck Bloor, who I wrote for. And that's the height of my career, was I wrote for Chuck Bloor. You hired Chuck to write for you, and he only had 2 other people that he ever had write for him, and I was one of those 2.
Okay, now Chuck Bloor, I just landed on this planet. Who is Chuck Bloor? Did he work with Miller and Manzi?
He did. He worked with them. He worked with the guys at CBS. He worked with all the networks. When you called Chuck Bloor, you paid money for him to give you ideas. He's one of the most interesting men you could imagine. He was in radio imaging for a long time.
So he was his own agency, as it were. Was he a one-man agency, or did he have his own shop was called Chuck Bloor? What was it?
I think it was called the Chuck Bloor Agency. And Chuck was over on off Selma, right behind CBS. Remember when CBS was on Sunset in L.A.?
Well, I would remember it if I had been an LA guy, but I know that they have moved.
Yeah, they moved. But it was over there in Hollywood, in official Hollywood. And it was above, upstairs office. And there weren't enough spaces on the walls for all the awards he won for stuff. He was just the best, and he is the best.
I really enjoy your blogs. I have to say they're better written blogs than just about any that I've read, including my own, which are, kind of just dashed off thoughts. But this morning I read your blog, and there's a write-up on Larry Watson, my old friend Larry Wattsman.
Larry's got a new job, and he emailed me yesterday, and he seems real excited about it. And it's a great company, Dispatch, who owns where he's going in Columbus, Ohio.
Right.
And he couldn't be happier. How do you know Larry?
Okay, Larry and I worked together at Channel 9, WWOR-TV in Secaucus, New Jersey, and we worked with Bill Hartnett. It was actually the first station job I ever had. This is real early in my experience here in New York, but I'd been at HBO and had helped launch Comedy Central, which was then called the Comedy Channel, and considered myself sort of a cable comedy promo guy. And we merged with Viacom's network called Ha. And Ha and Comedy Channel merged, and several iterations later became Comedy Central, but there were several names. One was CTV, the Comedy Network. That was one of the names of the relaunched network. And we're all like, hey, that's an acronym, but that's not what the acronym stands for. And everybody was like, yeah, that's what we're going to call ourselves. I'm like, that's going to last 2 months. But we did relaunch the channel with the two combined channels as CTV, the Comedy Network. And that's what we actually said in the in the IDs and the end pages of all of our spots. But they finally 6 or so months into it said, hey, we're going to have to lay half of you off. And
because we branded wrong.
We branded wrong, and we have 2 promo departments where we only need 1. And they were vastly different promo departments that were coming from very different perspectives. Betsy Aarons was running the Ha side of the on-air promotion group. I think it was very Nickelodeon-esque. That's the school they all came from. I worked for Chris Spencer, and Chris was the director of on-air promotion for the Comedy Channel. Chris Spencer, who many of us know, went on to great success at HBO and was really key to their branding mission from, I want to say mid to late 90s on until only recently. But anyway, Chris was running a little bit looser shop, and everybody was cutting spots and trying to be clever and funny, and just sort of, we had a lot of unsold ad time to fill with promos. So I was making a lot of interstitials back in those days and movie promos. So both Chris and I were shown the door.
Oh.
Well, the nice thing was that right away, and strangely, my wife had just quit her job, so the two of us did 2 months of traveling. We were only going out at the time, and we were spent a month and a half in Bali. So
oh wow!
Don't cry for me, Argentina. So I come back from Bali. I'm out of work. I am penniless, and I start freelancing around town. And there was a job at Channel 9 in Secaucus open, and I lived in the Upper West Side. And I went out there and talked to them about the job, and they hired me. And it was sort of like, wow, this is a weird world. I mean, it was just, I wasn't ready for it necessarily. But on day one, I meet guys like Bill and Larry, and those guys could play some mean practical jokes.
Ooh.
Together, in fact. And
Aha.
But usually somebody else was the victim. Only occasionally was it me.
Oh, the liars will be running in that great day, Lord, the liars will be running in that great day, Lord.
Larry has just gone from market to market to market, and I don't know what chemical you have to have in your brain that enables you to pull that off.
I think that it's a spirit of adventure and a true need to find a place that makes you feel at home, and it's really hard to do. And when somebody says that they need to make a jump, I'm really, really unhappy with this city or this general manager or this ownership group or this station, I think I'll take this and I'll say, well, are you, trading one problem for another? And I think that a lot of people do that. They're looking for the place where it's that yin and yang, that perfect yin and yang, and it's hard to find.
Well, I do that as a freelancer to a degree, but I stick to the greater New York City area for the most part. I do occasional location work, but
There's so much available in New York. The sad part about being creative in the hinterlands, which is not LA, Chicago, New York, or at times Boston, or if you speak Spanish, Miami, there's not a lot of options. You're a total creative person. You're at a major network affiliate. You've been doing super work. Your life is good. Everything gets topsy-turvy, and you're stuck going, oh, where do I work? I'll tell you one of the big questions that I want to address, and there's no right or wrong answer, and I don't even know who to call because my one big agency guy has died. He was marvelous. Phil Dusenberry, what a great guy.
Yes, that Phil Dusenberry. For the uninitiated, he was a really important guy.
Phil Dusenberry was the legendary, and I use that word cautiously because I don't want anybody to roll their eyes. But he was just amazing, and he was the head creative for BBDO, and I worked for a subsidiary, what do they call it, branch, whatever, of BBDO in Dallas called Tracy Locke, and my assistant's father was the head of BBDO, which I did not know when I hired her. Don't give me that look. And so, yeah, but talk about, I've always landed, in the clover. And so I got to talk to, Storm and Norman Campbell a lot. And I got to know Phil Dusenberry because one day he said, call Phil Dusenberry, he'll tell you. And I find out later, oh my God, nobody gets to talk to Phil Dusenberry. And he was fabulous. But the question that I have had for a long time, and I get asked this a lot, and that is, what in the world is wrong with agencies that they look at somebody who has a television marketing background, whether it's at a network, a cable net, an affiliate, or even a subsidiary, and they never even want to talk to you about a job. And I think that's a real mistake on the agency's part.
Well, it's happening right now, and I am literally like in the box that says promo guy.
Oh,
I mean, it is sealed tight.
yeah. But how do you break out of that box? I'm a big believer it's face to face.
One more quick note about Kate's blog. She's been doing it since 2006. 10 years. That's probably 9.5 years longer than most bloggers stay at it. And it's almost never about her. It's always about her subjects. Us. Promo Cowboys. Creative types who move from job to job and town to town. The whole thing really took shape when she joined the industry publication of record, Broadcasting and Cable, back when there was a widely distributed print edition.
I loved writing for Broadcasting and Cable. It was really easy. And I say easy in the sense of it was an extension of what I was doing, and I just expanded on it. So there was no learning curve, and there was no, big change or anything else. And then they decided that they weren't going to focus as much on the people, because I don't know if anybody else used to read Broadcasting Cable, the printed edition. I read it backwards. And then they had a new editor come in, and he decided he didn't want to do it that way. So again, doing more with less. They assigned it to somebody who just listed it. So, but I loved it.
Come along, boys, and listen to my tale. I'll tell you my troubles on the old Tism Trail. Come-a-ki-yi, yippee-yi-yay, come-a-ki-yi, yippee-yi-yay.
It's funny what you're talking about sort of harkens to part of the conversation I had with Bill Hartnett on the episode I did with him, which was that people and character are really disappearing from our industry and the way we present ourselves as an industry, and it really is about the marketing brief, and everything is related to a marketing brief and a bottom line. And I want to read about people. I want to tell stories about people.
Totally agree. Do you know why I've been able to write that blog for so long? Because it's about other people. It's not about me or my company or how great I am. There's no bigger turnoff in the world than some pontificating, bollocksy, I get to use that word again, guy or girl who just has to go on and on and on about themselves. That's not a blog. That's a bore. And there's a big difference. And you really have to be careful when you write to make sure that it's not about you, unless it is indeed about you.
Ocean whiskey, get thrown.
We want the idea of walking in the door, and when you say, we've decided to paint our logos on dogs and walk them up and down all the business sections of town, promoting the dog show that's on after the parade, and have somebody look at you and say, go ahead, you're the expert. But I think we do. We want that walking in the door and having them say, you're the expert, you're the marketing person, you're the creative person, instead of sitting around the conference table and having the business lady who's very nice and you like her a lot say, well, I really don't like that. And I think that whole idea of I don't want to have to explain myself to people who don't get it. It's like speaking a foreign language. If you're going to France, you're going to have to make a speech in French. If you make it in English, they're not going to get it. So consequently, when you walk into a boardroom today to get approval, you have to speak their language. And that's really hard for creative people to figure out. It took me a while. And I keep saying you have to explain to them what it means. And I remember explaining to a large ownership group that image was very important. And the way I did it was finding out what club they belonged to and why they didn't belong to another club. And they got it.
And that's one of the reasons that I think getting an MBA might be one of the smartest things for any creative coming up, and something I considered for about 3.5 seconds.
Oh, same here. And let me tell you, I took all my MBA classes at SMU, where they really teach you how to go for the bottom line. And I never got the MBA. I didn't want to take any of the accounting classes. So I took all the marketing stuff. But don't get an MBA because you're going to make you do all this accounting. And frankly, the easiest way to do accounting is to call someone.
Kate Bacon is a mensch among mensches. And yes, a woman can be a mensch. Ask Google. She has more Facebook friends and more LinkedIn contacts than pretty much anyone I know. She's met presidents and Prince Charles. And oh yeah, Kate knows what it's like getting fired in America.
I got fired by a guy who had his job because his wife was one of the nieces of the owner of the network. All bosses have hidden agendas. They might tell you, think outside the box. We want something different. We want to be number one. They say that, but that's not really what they mean. They have a hidden agenda. Mm-hmm. And I worked for a guy who had a hidden agenda. And I didn't know. I was so earnest, and I wasn't even that young, but I've always been very earnest. I don't understand, guys who set you up for failure. I don't understand that whole thing. It makes no sense. What a waste of time. I thought that the goal of the job was to get numbers and ratings, which then transferred into revenue. And because that's what I was tasked with, and that's what I was told the goal was. And what happened was he called me in on a Friday the 13th. And yeah, really, I remember that thinking, well, that sucks. And he called me in and he sat me down and he said, I need to talk to you. Now, this was a guy who did not talk to people well. He could never make eye contact with you. It's like, wow, that's kind of sad. And he's sitting there and he's looking all over his office. And in today's world, I think that maybe, pills would have helped. And he said, our ratings have never been higher. Our revenue has never been better. Our people have never been happier, but I'm letting you go. And I sat there and I said, is this a joke? And he said, well, it's not a joke. And then he started to get snotty. And he goes, it's not a joke. Why would you think it's a joke? And I said, well, because it's so illogical. And he said, that's the problem with you. You always make sense.
Oh, my gosh.
And so I left, and they were they were really doing well at the time. And they continued to do what I had put in place. So they continued to do well.
That's called a good succession plan on your part.
Well, yeah.
There ain't no ding-dong bells of heaven. There ain't no ding-dong bells of heaven, no.
I once had a guy come in. He did not fire me, but I knew it was time to leave. He was the corporate head, not just the GM was a lovely man, but the corporate guy who had a flat top haircut and was a former Marine.
Mm.
Okay, Barry, that's not my kind of guy. You
Hmm.
know? And he sits down and he closes the door and he says, I don't think you're doing a good job. And I said, wow, tell me why. And he says, well, because you leave every night at 5:30. And I've never known anybody who does marketing and promotion who leaves every night at 5:30. And I said to him, I said, well, then you've never known anybody who knows how to manage.
Boom! Drop the mic.
Dropped the mic. And that's when I immediately went home, called my friend Tish and said, I need a job. You know?
Sam Bass was born in Indiana. It was his native home. At the early age of 16, young Sam began to roam. He first
Let's
came
pretend
out-
this is a 60-second conversation, but somebody's looking for advice about the following topics. Just the quick off the top of your head, here's what I do. I don't have a timer set. We don't have to be too formal about this, but quick answers to managing talent.
Managing talent is do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Transitioning careers.
You have to be patient and you have to remember that you can't make a change until you're in the ballpark.
Okay, life as a freelance writer.
Oh, it's tough because not only are you writing and focusing on doing the best writing you can do, but then that other half has to come out and you have to go and tap dance and twirl the fire baton for the next job.
Great. Network clients and how to attract them.
Oh, sweetie, if I knew that, I would be making this call from the south of France.
Me too. I'm in Connecticut's version of the south of France, so I can't complain. Truly. Okay, last one. Your friend, Bobby Costas.
I've known him so long I can call him Bobby. Bobby Costas and I worked together in St. Louis, and he is a hoot. And he always is the nicest man to me whenever we're together. And I think it's because I make him look tall.
Kate Bacon is known for giving great career advice to pretty much everyone she comes in contact with, whether they ask for it or not. Here's her uplifting message for today.
I want people to stop being insecure about their creativity. If you are that insecure about how creative you are, maybe that's not the job you should be doing. And I meet people all the time on the phone, online, who are so creative and they're hiding their talents under a bushel because they're either working for someone who doesn't want them to shine or they're working for a company that's the wrong match. And I want to tell people when you go and look for a job, it's a matter of two adults sitting down and saying, I can do this for you. What can you do for me?
Food for thought for Promo Cowboys. No, because there's a lot of us out there. I mean, you know that. You know, when you go to industry parties, especially around Promax, say, there will be a lot of guys just like you looking to sort of say, okay, where's my next meal coming from?
But I still think that when there's a click, you know, and you know it, you've felt it, you've been there. When there's that click, even as a freelance promo cowboy, it makes you feel better at the end of the day, and they'll keep calling. And I think that's what my goal always is not just to get the business, but to keep the business, to keep the freelance business. I want them to come to me with a sales thing. I want them to come to me with a image thing. I want them to come to me with whatever comes up. Or call and say, hey, I just lost so-and-so. Who do you suggest? That's that relationship building. I think promo cowboys should absolutely have the horse ready to go, but they should also know that there's certain ranches that they're always going to feel at home in.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kate Bacon. Friend her on Facebook, follow her on LinkedIn, find her blog at welldonetalent.com, and remember, done is spelled D-U-N-N-E. As always, this edition of Promo Cowboys has been brought to you by bourbon, beer, and bar pretzels, and by the novel Promo Cowboy, a TV industry crime drama by the author of Life Askew. That is me, Barry Fitzsimmons. Promo Cowboy and Life Askew are available as ebooks and in hard copy at Amazon.com and your finer bookstores. I want to thank my guest today, Kate Bacon. I also want to thank freesound.org, who provided instrumental music for this Promo Cowboys podcast, and the Pond 5 Public Domain Project for all the archival cowboy ditties I threw in there for fun. Thanks again for joining me. I'm really excited about this podcast, and I hope you'll become a subscriber on iTunes. Of course, I'm interested in your feedback. Reach out to me on Twitter at Promo Cowboy, also on Facebook and LinkedIn at Barry Fitzsimmons. If you've got a good story about getting fired, I'd love to hear from you. We'll be happy to keep your name out of it. Thanks to Patrick Fitzsimmons for creating the Promo Cowboys podcast artwork. And thanks to my support team, Jared Maynero, Charles Berlepsch, Zach Trinka. You're the best, guys. Promo Cowboys is a Steve production. Steve is a division of Igloo Media, LLC. This podcast was produced by yours truly, Barry Fitzsimmons. Thanks again for joining us. As Promo Cowboy says, shoot, we're almost out of beer. Take us out.